Hey, Riccardo, can you hear me? Oh, you're
Mistake.
mute.
Unmute. Here we go.
Yes.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
How are you? Good to
Good,
see you.
good. Good to see you as well. Can't believe it's already the end of the day for the first event, but really
Wow.
happy.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you, thank
I
you. I don't
love
know
you.
if you.
I love your book in the back.
Oh yeah, the Rome book. Yeah. So I like your background too. Is that real background or virtual?
No, it's real. It's real.
Okay, good, good. I always have to ask because it's one of those things where it's a fun
You
question.
never know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you so much for agreeing to speak today. I know we had our conversation, our pre-talk conversation, and I thought we'd start with a quick bio from yourself, and then we can get into questions talking about a little bit about your background in entrepreneurship and a lot on Ecole 42 and Italy and get to audience questions as well.
Okay. Sure.
So
Let's keep it flexible. It's
yeah,
interesting when
yeah,
it's a bit
absolutely.
more
A bit more
out
fun.
of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
So we met. I think we met only a few months ago, but I I know that I've heard you speak a bunch of times through Founders Forum, and of course Ramin from Human Capital Network, who they're a sponsor as well. Very close friends with you, and just I've heard a lot of interesting stories and great stories from your time at King through a bunch of friends in my network. Obviously, we have David Helgeson speaking tomorrow, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit of why you decided to become an entrepreneur and maybe one or two anecdotes from the early days.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I will. If you ask me, I will. I will. It's better if I tell you later, no, rather than repeating it twice. I mean,
Yeah. I
okay.
mean, just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
we keep it as a, exactly, exactly.
yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
How,
so
how, how, how were the earlier interviews and then discussions and the cooking? How was the cooking?
it was great. It was great. It was great. So we're actually live now with our talk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
Perfect.
so I was like, we were texting with the team. We said we don't want to make people wait 15 minutes. I think we're just gonna get into it now. I should
Perfect.
have said that when I started, but no,
Sounds
we're
good.
live now actually. So I wanted to bring it in early because I was like, look, let's just get right into it.
Yep.
But the other sessions were great. Everybody loved it, and I think we succeeded in our mission of bringing together like some Italian cooking and drink making as well as entrepreneurship. And the first session, Raffaele mentioned Ecole 42, and we talked a little bit about how in France it really helped, and of course in the States, bring a lot of engineering education to people that wouldn't normally have access to it. So I mentioned in our talk earlier that we're going to talk a lot about that in your talk now. So yeah, so no, we're live now actually.
Perfect. Let's kick off.
Yeah.
Hi to
So
everyone.
yes, hello world. So yeah, so let's start. Tell me a little. I mean, tell the audience, some fun anecdotes, a little bit about your background. I know most people know it, so I don't want to bore you asking questions about King and everything. I want to focus on some juicy, interesting topics as well.
Okay. So how early shall I start? I mean, basically to become an entrepreneur was always my desire. My father was a dentist, and he basically, for him, it was really important to be his own master, let's put it this way. So not to have anyone to report into. And I got from very early on
And was this?
this.
Sorry to interrupt. Was this
Yeah,
was this in Italy or?
it was in Rome. Yeah, in Rome. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my mother city. So from very early on, basically I wanted to become an entrepreneur, but I had no idea what to do, and I had also no skills in doing anything. So I had to find my way over time, and I tried always in the decisions, my career decisions, to choose paths that will leave all doors open and allow me to take many opportunities or opportunities in this direction. But it took some time before I found something attractive. So before I studied economics for this reason, to leave me all doors open. I should have probably studied engineering or informatics.
Really
And
well.
then after that,
Yeah.
then I went into consulting, and I still didn't know what to do and how to do it. And only in '99, and during the hot internet years, the beginning of the internet, let's put it this way, I'm an internet dinosaur. Then we did a company. I joined actually a startup called Spray that very quickly went from very few people to 800 people in a space of a year. I built up the German operations, and we ended up selling the company in stock, in an exchange of shares, not without making any money. But that's where I met my co-founders, and that's where I learned a lot. And then after that, I had
and give us a little time frame. How old were you? What was the? Because I know a lot of a lot of my entrepreneur friends, we started 19, 20. Some start 28, 25. Some start at 45. Give us a little bit of what was your age? And I know it was
I was 8 years in consulting, so I was basically in my early 30s. I'm now 53. Sorry, 51. Apologies, 50.
Okay. I was
so no, and basically, fundamentally, it took some time to find the path. So I went first into consulting, and after consulting, I went to Spray. Then we sold the company in 2000. And then after that, I joined a venture capital company called Benchmark as an entrepreneur in residence, which is a fantastic term that basically says only that you have a desk and you have to find a new business idea. And if you find a new business idea, then they might invest in you, or you might get funded. And I came in with 50 business ideas. One of these ideas was to do online dating. This was in 2002. There was no paid dating at the time. And we looked into different options, and one of the options was to invest in an existing company called UDate. I joined that company, and we sold the company again after a few months after I joined. That's where I made a bit of money. I made about 300,000 pounds. And that's the money that we used fundamentally.
Which is a real exit. I mean, Silicon Valley standards, they'd say it's not, but that's a real, I mean, people listening attending,
no, but,
I mean, that's legitimate.
No, look, I think that, that money was actually really important, because with that money, we could start King.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, so, I went all in. So I put in all the money in the company to start. I called my former colleagues and friends from Spray. The other co-founders were the former CTO of Spray, the former chief product developer, chief product person in Spray, and then two of the best developers that we had in Spray. And that's how basically we started. And when you start a company, you try to last as long as possible, the money to last as long as possible. So what I did is to basically cut all the costs. So I gave up my flat, I rented flat, I gave up the car, I gave up everything, and I moved into the guest bedroom of a friend of mine. And that's where I stayed for 2.5 years.
And this was in London, right?
This was in London, yeah.
And I have a quick question. I know I'm interrupting.
Sure.
So, and because I know this question is going to come up. So in between King and Spree, right? So Spray, how long, what was the time period to come up with the ideas? Like because I've always felt that the in-between periods, and this was one of the questions that we have going forward, but I didn't want to save it to then, because it's really important for part of your story, is how much time did it actually take between one idea to the next idea?
Well, I tried always to collect ideas in the meantime. So just to give you an idea, before starting at the Benchmark, the venture capital company, took me about a year. I took about a year off before, and tried to collect ideas. And then after UDate, actually was relatively fast. It took us basically, I would say, 3 months, but I started already before looking for what could we do. And with Spray, the good thing was that we actually developed many different products in different areas, because Spray was a portal, basically similar to Yahoo. And so we developed also all the vertical contents and channels. And we developed, for example, one of the first free dating sites in Europe. That's why I thought it was taking off. We developed games. We developed actually also some first mobile features, which was quite fun, but based on SMS at the time. and so we had already a portfolio of things that we could play with. And then I left busy dating after we sold the company, and then busy 3 months later we were busy together with the guys and working on new ideas, and then we launched 6 months later a first version of the product, and basically my money and the money of one of my co-founders, we basically put in the money, and the others were working at very low costs. Lasted for more or less a year, slightly less than a year, until the day, the Christmas day, in fact. So we had to be funded before Christmas, and it was the day before Christmas when one of the angel investors, basically, who said already for many months that he wants to invest, but he had trustees who had to sign for him, and it took a very long time for this bureaucracy, and they were still not signing. So if they had not signed that day, the day before Christmas, I would not be here now. At least I would not be having done a King.
Basically, it was like a Christmas present.
Well, kind of. It was actually a Christmas adventure, meaning that basically they finally signed the fax. At the time they still used faxes to sign contracts. So they signed the fax, and the fax came through. But in the middle of the page, basically the fax broke down. So we didn't receive the important part, which was the signature. And so you can imagine, yeah, exactly as you reacted. That's how actually we were kind of.
I would be destroyed. I'd be like, what is going on? Like, oh my.
Yeah. So I had to fly home that day. So I was basically on the way to the airport. I was waiting the last hour. So luckily we were in a serviced office, a very cheap, but it was a serviced office, so we could find another fax somewhere else. But that was one of the, let's say, many scary moments in the company.
And were you afraid? Like, how did you feel? Like, I mean, because we can look back on it and say now, okay, relatively speaking, no, I wasn't afraid. But like, were you kind of like, I guess we always say in English, I like kind of like shitting your pants. Sorry, but like, were you like, oh my God, what's happening? Or were you focused and we're gonna get this through no matter what? Like in a movie, I'm gonna figure it out and make it work. Or
no, I tried not to, because those were my last pants, so I better keep those pants. No, basically, but we were physically, I remember very well, it was me and my co-founder, Toby, we were physically sitting on the floor. So it was a very, very small office. There were only 2 desks basically in the office. And we were literally sitting on the floor, basically destroyed, because, we wanted to close without having any debts. And for doing that, we had to close at the end of December. And that was basically the last day, because afterwards there were Christmas, everyone was basically gone.
Wow, that's an intense story.
So yeah, but that was not the worst moment. That was one of the many moments. We had worse.
Got it. So okay, so we've got this sort of early interesting period of King, and again, as I said, I don't want to spend too much time on King because I think there's a lot of fantastic content online about King, that of your story specifically. But can you like tell us a little bit of how it went from growing a company from, like, let's say a couple hundred employees to whatever the public entity, and being a part of that, and as an entrepreneur, how did you change going from, and I know you experienced this before, right, in the past startup, but at being the actual public facing CEO, how are the pressures a little different?
Well, I think that our case is probably a bit different from the case of some other companies, but because we had to pivot. So before basically growing really fast, we had actually a very long phase, where we had the initial phase was actually growing very fast. Then suddenly we got disrupted in 2009 by Facebook. Mm-hmm. And so before growing really fast, we went actually through a very steep decline, because Facebook was basically killing Yahoo, and we were the largest partner of Yahoo. And it took us about 2.5 years before we cracked Facebook, before we cracked how can we bring our games to Facebook. And then after that, there was a new disruption, because the web was disrupted by mobile, but that was actually something which it was easier than once we cracked Facebook to bring our games to mobile. So we were kind of used to going through turbulence.
Yeah.
In some ways, we've been through turbulence a few times. And so when we saw that we cracked Facebook in 2011, the first thing we did was basically to scale the team in advance. And we basically doubled the size of the team every 6 months. And this was a massive effort. And we always said we always want to grow with quality. Quality is always the most important parameter. Quality in people. And so we didn't want to reduce our recruiting criteria. Actually, we even made it more difficult. So every person would be interviewed by 6 people. And if one person was not in agreement, then we would not hire the person. So one person against, and you were basically out. And we set up a process for recruiting. So we had to, ideally you have everyone in the same office in the same location. But if you want to grow at that kind of speed, in order to recruit really high quality people without reducing the quality, then we had to open up new offices. So we opened up new offices in order to be able to recruit additional talent and be able to source talent in other cities.
And where were these other cities, and where did you grow the most in terms of talent? Was it talent in let's say talent?
Across the board, and it also, and across the board, and also geographies. We grew the talent mainly in Europe, in terms of development. So the largest offices were Stockholm, London, and Barcelona. But then we also had in offices in Denmark, also for a short while also in Italy. We had also offices but those were marketing offices in Japan and in Korea. And then we opened up an office also in the US, first in Los Angeles, then in San Francisco. Those were mainly focused on building a relationship with Apple, Google, and Facebook.
Got it. Okay. So I guess I have one more question on sort of the King side, and I really want to get into what you're doing next, and sort of the projects you're working on in Italy. I guess my last question on the King side, and there's a few questions from the audience on that, which we'll save to some of the audience questions. But when you decided to go public, you went public, been there for a few years. What was the decision process behind the Activision acquisition? And how did you know that was the right move to make at that time?
Well, I mean, going public was a different decision than the
Activision
decision.
Okay, it's totally different. Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
I think the going public decision was a decision for the long term, meaning we had some investors on board that were institutional investors. So in order to give them a path to exit, we went public so that over time they could basically sell their shares, and we would not be under the pressure of selling the company. So that was one decision. Because the company was profitable, so we didn't need really money from the market. It was more to basically create a path. Yeah. So, but as a public company, then you have comparables. Then at some point, we attracted the interest from a couple of companies. And one of these companies was Activision. And once you have interest as a public company, you have to set up a process. So we set up basically a process where, there's a formal way to where there's a board decision, but before that, we need also to check what kind of is it the interest in the market. And then ultimately we decided for Activision, and the price was one reason, but the other reason was actually that we thought it was a very good home for the company and for the people.
And making that decision, how long did you stay on after the acquisition, and what were you thinking in your head of sort of the next phase of your life? Because I'm assuming you accomplished your entrepreneurial dreams. I'm assuming, I don't know, let me ask, did you feel like you've accomplished your entrepreneurial dreams by that process, or where are you on that, right?
I feel that I'm trying to figure out what I want to do when I'm a grown-up.
Maybe
no, I think.
Let me know because I still have that question. I guess.
Yeah. No, I think that I think your mind never stops, right? So I think that now I'm actually busy. I stayed at Activision for 3 years. Actually, I just announced recently that I left also as chairman. I left my CEO role about a year ago, and then I became chairman. And then since August, I'm also out from my chairmanship, so I'm completely out now. But I'm actually really busy because we set up with my co-founders an angel fund called Sweet Capital. So it's only our money, so it's not an institutional fund. We want to invest our own money. And so we focus on things that we think we understand. So mobile consumer, and things where we think we can help other entrepreneurs.
Game investment. Do you guys make game investments, or preferably not?
Not yet.
Yeah, I always ask that because I met with Christian, when I was running my startup, and he's like, "This is gaming adjacent, but it's too similar to gaming, and I know Riccardo probably won't like it." And I was like, "Okay."
No, I love gaming. I mean, gaming is in our blood, so that's not the issue. The issue is that we had a non-compete, so I still have a non-compete. So that was that was the logic, the reason behind. So for the time being, we don't invest in games or in gaming, but invest in basically all kinds of other areas, but always mobile consumer.
Got it. So you've got the venture fund, and then you also mentioned in our pre-talk I think there's the biomedical fund, or the nonprofit that you're working on.
Yeah, I set up also a biomedical research fund that basically, but that's a charity. So there we fund projects in rare genetic children's diseases, and then the last thing
behind that, why did you pick that topic? Or
well, there's as you might imagine, there's some personal reasons.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm trying to help there.
Understood.
And then the last area which I'm now very passionate is I think that there is a need I'm trying to help my country, basically Italy. I've been away for. Sorry.
Which brings us here today, really.
Yeah, I was born there, I grew up there, I love Italy, and at some point in time I would love to go back. And I think I think that tech can do really great things for basically for the economy in general. And unfortunately, Italy is quite in the last places in tech, at least from a total amount of funding in tech. And my experience is that you actually don't need a lot of money to start. And for example, in King, we spent a huge amount of money on marketing. In the first quarter, when we launched Candy, we spent $100 million of marketing. Second quarter, again, $100 million. But actually, all of that spending was organic, completely paid by the product. We didn't use a penny from our from investors. So I think that if you have something that is good, you can actually create a world champion even in a small town like Stockholm. Candy Crush was developed in Stockholm. Yeah, and you don't need a lot of money in terms of financing. What you need is to have a good idea. More importantly, you need really good people, and you need to do it, and you need to launch something that is new, not only in Italy but also on an international basis. Otherwise, you can't scale it. If and I believe that if the idea is new and is good, and the product is great and different from what else is available, then marketing is cheap. If the idea and the offering is similar already to what is existent or slightly better, then marketing can become very, very expensive. And if you follow others, then it's super expensive.
I mean, there's some fantastic rules globally for entrepreneurship, and I think what I kind of want to focus a little bit now on the talk is a little bit about Italy and the work that you're doing in Italy that brought us together. Because obviously my background is on my mom's side all Italian. My grandmother was born in Foggia, and I'm putting on this event to really also bring back sort of the thanks to Italy for making my family there and everything else. And my dream is also I want to move back to Italy. So I kind of want to transition a little bit to some questions and sort of see what you think where the future of Italy is heading, right? And in our pre-talk that we had a few weeks ago, you mentioned that, and I really like this comment, that every country has a very similar distribution of smart people. So it's not true that other places have smarter people, right? It's just based on the education and the access to capital and the need for a positive feedback loop. So, can you tell us a little bit about your efforts with Ecole 42 and bringing that education to Italy and primarily the engineering education?
Sure. So let me start maybe from how I got with this, how it came to this idea.
Yeah.
How it came to this idea. So in 2017, I met before Xavier Niel. He was the founder of the École 42. He's a Syrian entrepreneur, one of the most successful digital tech entrepreneurs in France. And he said, look, why don't you go and check out the school that I opened? So I went to Paris. We were there with my girlfriend for a very nice weekend. And actually, I spent half of the weekend at the École 42 with her because it was unbelievable. It was fantastic. I was like, oh my God, this is great. And basically, what did I see there? So just to let you know, the person who took me around the school, who showed me the school, was a former pastry chef.
Oh, wow.
He had an accident. So he couldn't work, he couldn't stand anymore. So he had to sit. And he liked basically to play games. And so he said, okay, why don't I learn to code? So he applied to the school. He was accepted. The school is completely free. Anyone can apply, meaning you don't need to have any prerequisite. You don't need to have studied anything before. You don't need to have super high, grades. Who knows what you did before for whatever reason you didn't study, or you studied but you didn't get the highest grades. Anyone can apply. It doesn't matter. The only thing we don't even ask for the passport, so you can be an immigrant. And the only thing that is asked is basically what is your age, and the second thing is you need to pass a logic test.
Why do they ask about the age? I'm just curious. Is it because
because there's an age bracket. It is actually quite wide. It goes from 18 to 35. That's purely because, fundamentally the key target is if you come out of the school at some point, we would like you to build your own company at some point in time. So if you think of the typical age of a serial entrepreneur when he starts his unicorn company is mid-30s.
Oh, good.
So
good time.
So I'm too old now. But so if you
already did it, come on. Save it for the rest of us.
So I can't do anymore. Exactly. I'm burned now. So, but if you this basically, it's just to say, look, if you come out of the school and you're at the beginning of your career, so that's where we put the effort. So if we only have 150 places, we want to make sure that we have the highest chances for these people to succeed. So this was the first thing. The second thing, which I loved, is that actually there are no teachers. So it's entirely based on a software. There are 21 levels that cover the key parts of technology that you need to know if you want to be successful and competitive and compete on an international scale. And this is based, it's structured like a game, basically. So if you want to pass the level, you need to be positively valued by other 5 students. In order to incentivize them, you have to give them a credit. You have 5 credits. When you finish your credits, you need to replenish your credits. And to do so, you have to evaluate yourself, other 5 students. And there is no diploma. So there is not the negative incentive that I need to pass because at the end I have a piece of paper. Yeah. So you need to pass because you want to learn. Because actually you can pass also, cheating if you want, because you just have to tell the other 5, let me pass through. But actually that's not conducive to anything, because you don't need you don't get a piece of paper for that. Right. So you want to learn, actually. And the other 5 students, they will help you to learn. They will help you to explain actually what have you done and how can you solve it, and maybe also other ways to solve the same problem. So it's basically a school that teaches you also to learn and to work together with others. And it's completely free. So it's a charitable effort. So so we licensed. When I came back to Italy after that, I'm on the board of my former university, of the Alumni Association of the former university. And so I discussed it there. I said, look, I saw this is fantastic. We should bring it to Italy. And they fell in love with the idea. And they've been fantastic. It's the University Lewis. And so they are now bringing the university, the coding school, the École 42, basically to Rome. I'm putting in also my money in it. And so we're launching in January. The first, the selection will be in October, the second one in November, the third one in December. And then the start is in January. There is something else to say. So we are adding a couple of more things to the, let's say, classic École. So the first one is we are building now a network of all the key digital companies in Italy. So basically I'm calling up together with a friend of mine. We're calling up all the key companies and we're inviting them to join this network. And the ideal is there, and therefore, what does the network do? So the network is basically gives internships. So students from the school will be able to go and do internships at the best tech companies in Italy, and the school will also be integrated in their recruiting plans, in the recruiting program.
Got it.
So that from the school they can actually go and work and learn also on the job, basically how these companies that are successful actually became successful, and they are in Italy. Secondly, if you are part of this École 42 or 42 in Rome, after the first year, you can actually continue the program in any other school, in any other of the other 20 schools, like in Silicon Valley or in Paris or in Helsinki, etc. And the last thing we're also working on is to build a network of mentors in Silicon Valley. Because, you know, if you want to understand actually what's happening, what's going on in the world of tech, ultimately a lot of the developments actually are happening in Silicon Valley. Google, Facebook, Apple, they have all their key development all there. So, but if you go to Silicon Valley and you don't know anyone, it's just a huge autoroute. Yeah. You don't know where to go. You go to Starbucks, you can maybe go in the Apple shop, but you won't meet anyone, you won't see anything.
Go to University Avenue in Palo Alto, and it's like, okay, this was fun for a day.
Exactly. But if you have a network, if you have a mentor and you can call someone up who works in tech, like for example, the other day I was talking to someone in a senior developer at Electronic Arts, an Italian guy. So that's where you can actually suddenly, you know, call someone. You have a number to call, and when you have an entry there, then it's actually much easier. So we're also building that.
And do you think then basically, in a way, when we're talking about the positive feedback loop, right, that doesn't really exist in tech in Italy, in a way you're bringing that now to Italy, but the new version of a positive feedback loop, right? It's more global. In Silicon Valley, it's not really global. It's still very centric to Silicon Valley. Yes, you can build a company in Silicon Valley and have it expand globally, but what I'm hearing from 42 Rome is that they're going to be able to sign up free participation, have the ability to get an internship, which could in theory lead to a job, right? If they're talented and learning, have a mentorship network, and then have that global network that they have access to, which it seems like this didn't exist at all in Italy before this. I mean, it's impressive. It's like really, it sounds like a perfect opportunity for people that, like you mentioned, the pastry chef in France, that, now there's less jobs maybe in hospitality or less jobs in manufacturing, that it could help train a whole new generation of Italian founders, right?
But this is certainly the hope. So I think that my criteria for success is not if those 150 people every year find a job. I'm pretty sure about that. So my criteria for success is if one of these 150 at some point in their lifetime is going to build a unicorn company, a company that is successful in tech, not only in Italy, but actually on a global scale. That's actually my criteria for success.
And do you feel that, okay, so we discussed the positive feedback loop of building, education, engineering education. And of course, both you and I are not engineers. So put yourself in the shoes, say you're 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old right now, sitting in Rome watching this. What decision would you make? Would you apply for 42? Would you go the route that you did before? How would you tell a younger person who is in Italy watching this, and of course a younger person in the States, it would apply as well, in the UK, but really the focus on you growing, from Rome, like you're watching it now, how do they decide, and would this be the right decision,
I think it's a very personal decision. I think what you want to do with your life, not necessarily to become a tech entrepreneur is the best thing in the world. It's something that, has a lot of sacrifice. There is also risk, obviously. But I think that my personal view is something that I wanted to do, to become an entrepreneur. And I believe that, certainly you need to have a good team, you need the skills, you need luck in life. But luck depends only how many times you try. If you try many times, at some point, you will be lucky. It's only a matter of basically not giving up. So if I could, I would probably do the École 42 if I had to go back in time, because I think that would give me the tools to realize and test ideas rather than, having an idea which is so vague that at the end you can't do anything with it.
Yep.
And it's simple, you can't realize it. Ultimately everything in tech works on the basis of you code it, you try it, and if it works, great, you have a company. If it doesn't work, then you do the next thing, you try the next thing. And if you can do it yourself, if you can program yourself, then you can basically continue trying and never stop really until you really crack it. You can try completely different things. But if you don't know how to do it, then what do? You have to go to someone else, you have to pay the person, so it's much more complicated. That's why I think, personally, my belief is that the current schooling system is basically the result of the industrial era. So it was developed in the 1800s by the industry that required people who comply with processes that filled exactly the gap that is needed and do exactly what they're told to do. But I think now, if you want to succeed, you need to create your own job. And actually, it doesn't matter whether you're an entrepreneur or if you work in a large company, you still need to create your own job. Because often now the principle is that you work on a project. If that project is not successful, we might not need the people, right? So you need to make sure that, or the people, if they're good, they work on the next project. So fundamentally, you need to create your own job, and you need new skills for that. You need to have skills. You need to be flexible. You don't need to do just what you're told. You need to crack a problem, not to give up, and learn by doing.
That's fantastic answer. I mean,
But if I may just basically pick up something that you said earlier, because you said before that someone in Silicon Valley not necessarily thinks of launching something on a global scale because they might just be focused on Silicon Valley or the US. This is extremely true. This is extremely true. I think that most entrepreneurs in the US don't think of launching something on a global scale. The difference is that if an entrepreneur in the US comes up with a new idea that is only new in the US and launches it in the US, he can build actually a unicorn. He can have a company that is worth billions and billions of dollars, purely focusing on the US. If someone in Italy or someone in Stockholm, in Sweden, builds a company focused on Italy or Sweden, they cannot do that. And I think that it's the issue. One of my key pledges or my key asks to Italians or Italian entrepreneurs when they start is please, 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 when you start a new company, don't just focus in terms of idea on something that is new only in Italy. Because if you're busy dead from the first moment, or you will never be able to scale over a specific size. Let me take you a different example. If an entrepreneur in Sweden, we started the company in Sweden initially. Yeah, so with my co-founders. My co-founders were.
Is Toby from Sweden or?
No, Toby is English, and Toby and I were here, but I moved to Sweden for basically 2.5 years. But my co-founders were Swedish because Spray was a Swedish company. That's where I met my co-founders, my tech co-founders. And so we started in Sweden. The product development stayed in Sweden for over 10 years. And no one ever in Sweden would ever launch a tech product purely focused on Sweden. Why? Because it's too small.
Yep.
In the US, I would say 99% of people who start a new company in the US start purely focused on the US, but the US has 300 million people. So, it's big. You can build a huge company. Yep. The issue with Italy is that Italy is stuck in the middle, actually not even in the middle, actually less than the middle, because Italy has about 60 million people. And most Italians, when they launch a company, actually focus purely on Italy with an idea which is new only in Italy. It's very tempting. But then when they are looking for financing, they have a business plan that reflects the size of the market. And actually the Italian payers pay less than US payers often in digital. So not only the market is smaller, but also the revenue per customer are also smaller than a comparable competitor in the US. So this means before even starting, you have a presentation for the investors with a budget behind that reflects the size of the opportunity that is much smaller, and the company, its potential is much smaller. Therefore, the valuation you get before launching is considerably smaller than a comparable competitor in the US or even in Sweden. Because a competitor in Sweden, a much smaller country, will immediately have in their plans that they're expanding, at least in Europe, with 500 million people.
Right.
Yeah. And so we're basically in Italy, we're basically castigating ourselves before starting. This means you will never ever have access to international investors that usually give you higher valuations and better terms, and you will get lower valuations and very likely also worse terms. And and it doesn't.
Which hurts you as an entrepreneur, because then you can't raise your future round, because
No,
who wants to be
exactly.
an entrepreneur if your investors own 100% of your company? Because
Exactly.
we do this because there is a, yes, a risk, but there's a reward, right? And that reward allows us. I think another interesting thing is in my conversation also with Ramin, when he, when you introduced the two of us, and obviously Human Capital Network is sponsoring, and wearing awesome T-shirt from them.
I'm doing small sponsoring tour.
So, Human Capital Network is all about, right, this idea of creating a more desirable future for generations to come. So, and like, I think in a way where you are in your career is you're giving back, right? Like you're not, you're at this point where you can look back and say, here's this incredible journey that I went on. And you mentioned luck. Luck is about trying as playing as many of your cards as possible, right? Because the truth is, you can be as lucky as you want if you keep trying, right? Statistically, you're right. One thing will work. So I guess a question that I have, and this is particularly for this concept of Italian entrepreneurs thinking that, look, we're in Italy. Yes, we're in Italy, but Italy is not our market, right? If they were to start something now, go through a call, 42 Rome, let's see, get lucky enough to join Human Capital Network with all of the connections that they have. When they're focusing building the company and looking at the market, do you think it's a combination of, okay, how much money can we make the most of? Or can we also have a purpose-driven component of the business? I know this is totally kind of pivoted type of a question, but it's something that's interesting to me because you're putting together these programs, you're inspiring people. Even to myself, it's inspirational just hearing this, right? It gets me excited. Like Tectalia wouldn't have happened if you didn't say, let's do it, right? So like that, changed my life and everybody listening to it. So do you think now it's about giving back as well with some purpose baked in with these entrepreneurs starting even younger?
You see, I don't think that one is antithesis with the other. It's not that you have to either you do good or you make money.
Yep.
I think especially newer generations are actually much better than older generations. Older generations were actually very egoistic for them, including my generation, very focused on, hey, let's make money. Doesn't matter whether the world becomes polluted and so on. I think newer generations actually are much smarter, are thinking much more, actually, we have only one world. Let's work together. Let's crack it. Much more feeling for the other person. And I think, therefore, in the future, if you want to be successful, you will not be successful just focusing on pure profits. Of course, profits are important, but I think that if you have a product that is compelling in terms of actually it's a good product for the world, it's a good product for people, it's a healthy product, it's something that does not pollute the world, it's something that is good for people, you have a few positive factors. The first one is the audience, your customers, will actually appreciate it. They will actually, you can maybe even ask for a higher price point for that. You will have probably a higher conversion to pay, etc. So economically, it makes sense. On the other hand, recruiting, you will see actually people want to work for good companies. They want to work for good people. They don't like to work for, for the person that doesn't care about people, for the person that only cares about making money and doesn't want to, and doesn't care how he gets there. People want to work and do good things. And, and I'm at a point now where I believe that one of the fundamentals in every person, one of the missions we must have in life is we must leave the world a bit better than how we found it. If we have this it's a very simple rule, and it actually shouldn't be too difficult in theory. If each of us would do that, the next generation would actually find something that is much better.
That's incredibly powerful, and I think it's true, right? And you're right. Looking at my generation and Gen Z, there's a lot of this focus on merging purpose, sustainability with profit as well, right? I agree. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, right? They can be combined. So I think we're now at the point of the talk where we can bring in some questions from the audience. I've really enjoyed this discussion, Riccardo, like super enlightening. So I'm going to look over here to figure out which questions we've got. We actually have a question from Anastasia. She asked, what did you enjoy the most, or what do you enjoy the most? Starting a company or running it long term?
I think I'm better at starting. Also running is fun, but I think the starting phase is really fun. It's tough, but I think the fact that you crack it. Now, the interesting thing is that even when you run a company, you actually sometimes have to restart a few times. That's what actually we had to do. And so I like the challenges. When it starts to become more of the same, I become quite bored. So I need to have, again, new challenges. But I think the new challenges, you can find new challenges continue.
So I have a question. You get bored, and this is a problem, is because I'm an entrepreneur too, and I'm getting excited listening to this because I get bored too when I start something. How do you keep yourself entertained if you get bored? Like, what do you do? Like, really, it's a problem.
Well, luckily, what you learn after a while is that actually when you get bored is usually when things go well, but actually things don't go well for very long. so actually the luxury of getting bored is a luxury you should need to use. But if you're getting bored, at some point you need actually to be worried, because it means you're not doing enough, or you're not thinking it's far enough. So I learned over time actually to think that if you get bored, then you need actually to challenge yourself to do actually more and push beyond what you're currently doing, which is you need to put yourself in question.
Got it. So okay, so obviously you like starting companies better than running them. You're now in the point of your career where you've left King. You've got, this is another personal question of mine, which I'm putting in before the next audience question. What's next? Like, what, other than the efforts of giving back in Italy, how are you thinking of what's next? And do you get some sort of sense of agita, feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not working on something now that is like the biggest next thing? Or are you comfortable? Like, are you in the zone where you're super busy and you're like, I've got the foundation, I've got a Cole, 42 Rome, I've got Sweet Capital. What are you thinking? Because you're still a very young entrepreneur, right? Like, you're not like, no, you are like, what are you thinking about?
I'm thinking of what to do next.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess basically you and I
would love to launch again something new. So I'm just thinking of what are big trends and what is happening in the world, and also what are big problems that actually need some solutions. Fundamentally.
And do you think that would be focused with a team in Europe? Or, because even in our conversation, I asked you, I said, where should I move next, right? Because of COVID, most people in my generation moved back to where they were from, because they're in New York, London, San Francisco, and they're like, we don't want to be here during the craziness of what happened. And are you thinking of location? Like, would you base it in London? Would you stay, Europe from a team perspective and, global focused? Or like, if you were to be starting today, and let's say you had that idea, where would you base it?
I don't think it's important for me where to base it. I always like to work remotely. I actually prefer, since ever, I always prefer to work from home rather than in the office. I don't mind at all if someone works from home rather than in the office. I think I don't manage by time, I manage by results. And so for me, it's more important is with whom to work. And I like to work with people with whom I worked before, because you know each other, because there's trust, and you know exactly what to expect. So in general, so when I work with someone, I tend then to actually have a very long-term relationship. And I believe in that you always meet at least twice. So.
Okay, got it. No, I think that makes sense. Yeah, team over place. So we have another audience question. We have 2 or 3 more audience questions, then I think we'll wrap it up. What effect do you think Candy Crush has had? This is from Casper Graziak. What effect do you think Candy Crush has had socially on the global community? what's your stance on educational games, and would you bet on them as a genuine alternative to the, I guess, the failing educational system in the long term, failing on both access to quality education and the cost? So does a educational game replace or enhance the educational experience?
Right. I think those are two separate questions.
Two separate. Then he asked,
yeah. I think, Candy Crush, we were not focused on education. In Candy Crush, we were focused purely on entertainment, on fun. And the target there was to basically fill 3 minutes of waiting time. So most of our players, about 60 to 70% of our players are female, 25 plus. Many of them, for example, are also in a phase where they have kids. It's quite stressful. It can be stressful. It's super beautiful, of course. I'm also a parent, but can sometimes also be a bit stressful. You need just to relax a bit, and you don't have a long time. So it's different. Our games were casual games, games that you don't play for hours in a row, but you play just for a few minutes. And we focused on really making those few minutes the best possible entertainment. You can't watch a movie for 3 minutes, but you can play a level of Candy Crush in over 3 minutes. Now, talking about education, you can use a lot of the tools from gaming also for education. Like, we're talking about this Ecole 42 that's built like a game. I'm learning now to play piano. I have an app called Simply Piano, which is fantastic. Again, it's built like a game, gives a lot of feedback, and has many levels, et cetera, et cetera. And you also have a community behind. So you can do many things also there. I think that, however, the focus of a game needs fundamentally to be fun. We call it the core loop. It has to be fun. The core of education, it has to educate. So you can use some of the tools from games, but you can't expect necessarily that to be as fun as playing a game, because ultimately you need to learn it. But you can use a lot of the tools from gaming also for education. And in particular, I think the most important one is, I think education now, using digital tools and media, makes actually education, improves a lot education. And one of the qualities is that you can offer exactly the same education across the board, and it's exactly the same. Like the Ecole 42 in Silicon Valley is exactly the same than the Ecole 42 in Rome, from a content point of view. It will be exactly the same. And it would be impossible if you had prior teachers, because then it would be difficult to bring them over from Harvard or from Stanford, et cetera.
And I guess to follow on to that question, VR. Do you see VR fitting in education at all? I know we asked about that in the first panel. Someone had a question on that. Or does it not matter the form that you're getting in digital, right? Because Zoom, let's be real, Zoom is hard to use in an educational format. Even in this webinar setting, it's slightly challenging because it's clunky. Do you think having more of a VR component would help education, or is it too early?
Oh my God, yeah, definitely. I mean, not only that, but I think education is a lot about just in time. So something is actually particularly, you learn something, especially when it's useful. And useful is not always, right, but in a specific occasion. Let's imagine that I'm learning a language and I want to order a toast, and suddenly in my glasses I have how to say in French, order a toast. You know what? I'm going to remember that more than if I was reading it in a book with other 500 sentences. So I think that's something that I think just in time and education with a tool that is understands also when you need what can make it much better. If I had a VR that allowed me to learn like being in a movie, of course it would be easier to remember.
And it'd be fun. Like
it would be fun, yeah.
I mean, as fun as it could be for school, but yes, it'd be fun. But
it would be fun, yeah.
I think it would be fun, and I kind of envisioning. So I play piano. I'm not so great, but my brother and my father play as well. And another personal question. What are you learning? Jazz piano, classical, or is it
jazz?
Cool. The next time in London, we can hang out. For me,
in a few years, yes.
Probably 3 to 4 years right now. I don't know. I'm in Miami right now. You can't see the background, but it is supposedly sunny outside. It's more like a London day. So we have one from the audience. and we'll wrap it up because I know it's getting late there. And
No worries.
yeah, so from Marta, ciao again. What are your plans for Ecole 42 if vaccinating proves ineffective? Is going remote, in your opinion, a feasible way for the average entrepreneur in the long term?
So what's the second question? What's the second part of the question is what?
So basically, I'll just rephrase it because is
Yeah.
going remote, so fully digital,
I see.
a feasible way for the average entrepreneur, or let's say the entrepreneur starting out, actually in the long term, could you see that be a platform that's totally virtual? Or is that not a great way to learn engineering and build your community and network?
Okay, so two parts of the question. The first part is, I believe there will be a vaccine, probably in the next, I would say 6 months, very likely. So I don't have any doubts that we will have a vaccine. So I don't think this is going to be forever. The second part is, is there a remote component? I think personally that one of the particularity of the School 42 is that it really binds you. I saw when I was there, I saw students and young people sticking together in the evening and working together to crack problems. So I think that is really, really important. People hanging together and eating something. When I was in consulting, we spend the nights, or in King, we spend the nights doing stuff. It's still different than being by yourself in your room and cracking something. Of course, you can also learn to code, also being remote, no question about that. But I think the friendships that you make when you are working together on something are still different. So that's the key reason. Otherwise, you could certainly offer the course, the entire Ecole 42 course, purely digitally, no question about it. But the purpose here is to build also teams where people start working together in teams, and over time, out of these students, you will have companies.
Yep. Wow, this has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you again for agreeing to participate and for introducing me to Ramin. Because I know tomorrow they've got their Human Capital Network panel. I hope next year when we do this in person, we can have you in person and see a whole year of how 42 Rome has taken off, and actually feature maybe some entrepreneurs from that as well.
We should do it next year. Hopefully, if everything is over, we should do it at the 42 Roma, the Luis.
Would love to.
Perfect place.
I'll take you up on that offer. Riccardo, thank you
Sounds
so
good.
much. And
thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Ciao. Grazie. Ciao.